All right, I think we'll get started here. Welcome to the first keynote talk of Darwin Week 2012. We had a really great round of speakers today. Let's give a hand for them. Just a few housekeeping notes. You'll find on your chairs you have bookmarks for tomorrow's talk, so be sure to check out those. And you also have speaker rating cards, so feel free to fill those out, and you can either leave them on your chairs or you can bring them to the back table after the talk is done. So, our next talk is by Dr. Joe Nickell, entitled Investigating the Paranormal. Dr. Joe Nickell has been an investigator of historical, paranormal, and forensic mysteries for 4 decades. He's the Senior Research Fellow for the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry and writes regularly for their journal, The Skeptical Inquirer. He has exposed many forgeries, including the notorious Jack the Ripper diary. Nickell is a former stage magician, private investigator, and academic focusing on literary investigation and folklore. He's also an Associate Dean for the Center for Inquiry Institute and the author or editor of numerous books. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Joe Nickell.
Are you going to be able to hear me from that? Is that going to work? Everybody okay? All right. Well, thanks for that nice introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here in Cedar Falls. Of course, as you get older, it's good to be anywhere, but it's especially good to be here for Darwin's Week. I have been investigating paranormal claims for now more than 40 years, and let me emphasize that I'm an investigator, not a debunker. I think it's just as wrong to set out to debunk something as it is to set out to believe it. Science is not in the belief business, and it's not in the debunk business. It's in the investigate and find out business. So while it's true that when I go to a haunted house, I think it's very, 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 very unlikely I will find a ghost. There would actually be 18 berries in that, but I tried to shorten the talk. But my goal isn't to go and debunk it. My goal is to go and explain it. Confident that if I can explain it to you, any needed debunking will take care of itself, right? Nod your heads, yes. Okay, good. So that's the spirit in which I'm approaching these mysteries. And as you know, most people's talks are thinly disguised commercials for the books they've written. And this talk will be no exception. I've written some 30 or 40 books. It's probably, something like 29 too many, but who's counting? I'm co-author of a forensic textbook. I was a detective for a world-famous private detective agency. I'm not allowed to use their name for publicity purposes, but did the name start with a P? Did they go after the Jesse James gang? I can't say. But I was a detective with an old and famous detective agency. I work at Amherst, New York. This is my little laboratory. If I need a real scientist, I go get one. But I've been doing science since I was a boy, and I was president of my high school chemistry club. So what more credentials do I need? I have made a special study, as mentioned, of forgery and documents. I am routinely hired by Time Warner or somebody to authenticate a manuscript like the Jack the Ripper diary, or not. You may have heard of the John Demjanjuk Nazi war criminal case in Germany. His family asked me to prove that ID card was a forgery. It was not. Whereupon I was dropped quickly by those people. Here I am investigating a weeping icon. providing a solution to a UFO mystery, walking on hot coals. Let me just say that when you're walking on hot coals and someone asks you to stop and pose for your picture, don't do it. Keep moving. Here I am showing, I think, Discovery Channel or somebody how to inflict stigmata on yourself. Approximately 100% of stigmata cases are pious frauds. They're not psychogenic. They're certainly not miracles. Can you find me in this picture? The guy on the right is a famous, world-famous healer. Do you know who this guy is? Anybody? Have you heard the name John of God?
Yes.
The famous Brazilian healer. And he was appearing in Atlanta, and for National Geographic Television, I went. They asked you to dress all in white. Can you find me there? I'm not the guy with the beard there. That's not me. Come on, I'm better looking. Yeah, that's me back there with those really gauche glasses and the cane. And, of course, pictures were not allowed at that event. I don't know how that one appeared. It must have been a miracle. But John of God was not healing anyone, and the spirit entities who tell him the secrets of your illness and what you need and so forth apparently were unable to warn him that an imposter, an undercover agent was sitting this close to him, actually got an audience in front of him, and he knew nothing. So I think he might be a phony. Let me start with one of my favorite cases still. This goes back to about 1972 in Toronto at Mackenzie House, the historic house of William Lyon Mackenzie in downtown Toronto, 82 Bond Street, where for about a decade before I got there were all manner of ghostly shenanigans. People would hear mysterious footsteps on the stairs when there was no one in the house, and the house was in fact locked at night. Do you need any more proof than that ghosts exist? You hear footsteps on the stairs, there's no one there, but you hear them, there are multiple ear witnesses. There were other phenomena. Mackenzie's printing press, which was locked and rusting in the basement, would be heard rumbling and clattering late at night. And they would go and investigate, and it was still locked and rusting. How do we explain these phenomena? One night, the caretaker's wife woke up in a back bedroom and saw a ghostly figure, presumably Mackenzie himself. So when I went, there was really quite a lot of phenomena that had been reported over 10 years' time at Mackenzie House. And at that time, today, you could have some idea about how to actually investigate haunted houses. The first thing you would do is avoid all the books by the so-called ghost hunters who don't know what they're doing. And you could read some of my books, and you would have an idea what you might do that would bear fruit. I had very little to help me. I had to fly to the seat of my pants and just go out and try to investigate. No real rules or procedures other than as I discovered them. But let me say that pretty quickly you could determine at Mackenzie House that whatever people were hearing that they were calling a printing press was not Mackenzie's printing press, because his press was a simple flatbed press. It did not make a rumbling, clattering sound like a rotary press, which is what people were describing. So whatever they were hearing, whatever it wasn't Mackenzie's press. Do you see how that works? Would anyone be interested in learning that next door to Mackenzie House was Macmillan Publishing Company? I think that this might interest some of you. Well, now, you'll have to admit, won't you, that you just jumped to a conclusion? It's okay. It's okay. I'm having fun with you. Because I jumped to that same conclusion all those years ago. And let me tell you, you're wrong. Because you just assumed that the printing presses were next door in a publishing building. In fact, Macmillan Publishing building was just an office building and warehouse. There were no presses of any kind in that building. So we're still not sure at that point what's causing these sounds. Well, let's go back for a moment, though, to these footsteps on the stairs. I went next door. You see, most people, the superstitious people living in the house, sleeping in the back bedroom, when they heard footsteps on the stairs, the stairway ran up against this wall. They thought it was a ghost. So they went in the opposite direction, you see. Whereas the nature of my work is I go towards the ghost. I'm not afraid of ghosts, you see. I go right there. And so I went next door, and the caretaker next door told me if I would come back late at night and ring the bell and so forth, he would come and he would personally show me the ghosts, some of which he said he knew personally. And it turns out that next door, just 40 inches away, in this building, against this wall, is a parallel iron staircase. And a late-night cleanup crew. And a caretaker and his family. Lots of people who could be going up and down their staircase, giving the illusion that from back here you were hearing footsteps on this staircase. You follow me? Mm-hmm. What about the printing press? It turns out that the press now is down here. At this time, it was in the basement. They weren't hearing sounds from here. They were hearing them from over here. There were almost certainly big push carts with big iron wheels loaded with metal rattling garbage cans as they dragged them across the floor. And, of course, it made a rumbling, clattering sound, which you can imagine, which to some people must have been Mackenzie's printing press, which rumbled and clattered, they thought. Remember me telling you about the lady waking up and seeing Mackenzie at her bedside? Here's an old wood engraving showing another ghost story where a spirit is appearing to someone in bed. How many of you have heard of the term waking dream? Okay, several of you. How many of you have heard of something called sleepwalking? Almost everyone. Interesting to me that while sleepwalking is a relatively rare phenomenon, everybody knows about it. But waking dreams, which are very common, are less well known. Now, why do you think that is? I suspect it's because the waking dreams show up as ghost encounters, alien abductions, in the Middle Ages, demonic visitations. I know someone who had a vampire appear to him. Here's what's happening. When we're asleep, our body and mind are both in the sleep mode. Right now, except for those of you dozing off, and you know who you are. Both our minds and our bodies are awake. But what if we get them out of sync? What if your body is awake, but your mind is still asleep? Why, you could sleepwalk. You see how that works? Suppose it's the other way around. Suppose your body's asleep, but you wake up. When you do that, you are in a hypnagogic state. You're in a state between waking and sleeping, and you have features of both. And in that state, it's common to hallucinate. And one of the reasons you might hallucinate is because you're unable to move. It's called sleep paralysis. Remember, your body is still asleep. It's scary. So some people hallucinate that a demon is sitting on their chest holding them down. Alien abductees hallucinate that they've been strapped down aboard a flying saucer by aliens who they see. These dreams are extremely real. People see them and will say, I was not dreaming. And that's true. They were not having an ordinary dream. They were having one of these vivid, mind-tricking waking dreams that fools people into thinking they've been visited by a vampire or a ghost. So when someone says, in a paranormal case, I was lying in bed and, your most common assumption is going to be they're having a waking dream. They're very common, particularly if they couldn't move. That's especially indicative of that. Okay, what about this photograph taken at Mackenzie House? This is a so-called warlock, and you can see this mist coming off his fingertips. You couldn't fake that, could you? Well, maybe you could. I could. But this is not a fake photo. Let's analyze it for a moment. What do we know about this photo?
It's old.
It's old, yes.
Overexposed.
Was it made with or without a flash?
I would say no.
You can see the shadow of the man.
You can see this very black shadow. You see this very bright glare. There's your proof right there that this is a flash photograph. And all that's happening are these white sheets of music, basically, and also any of this background, is just bouncing the flash back. Just bouncing it back. And washing out, overloading with light, an area of the photograph so it shows up as a sort of washed out, misty area. Okay? That's all that is. Consult a photo expert, and they'll diagnose it that quickly. Well, ghost photographs have been around a long time. Isn't it interesting that the very earliest photographs, so-called daguerreotypes, never had a ghost in one? There were no ghosts in any of the daguerreotypes that I'm aware of or been able to find out. Then there was a new type of photography called ambrotypes. Again, no ghosts appeared in ambrotypes. Then there were, and I'm sure most of you are going to be familiar with tintypes. You've heard of tintypes from the Civil War era. Again, no ghosts in tintypes. But as soon as glass plate negatives were invented, making double exposures possible, ghosts began to appear in photographs. It's a remarkable phenomenon. And the inventor of this appears to have been a man from Boston named William Mumler. This is not a Mumler picture, but it'll serve. Mumler pictures now quite rare and expensive, if you can find one. But Mumler was an ordinary photographer using these glass plates. Now, you could recycle your glass plates. If you were sure you were through with it, you could clean the emulsion off, right, down to the bare glass, and then it could be re-emulsified and reused. You follow me? But suppose you didn't clean off the original image quite perfectly. You left a faint residue. During the long exposures that were needed at that time, even the most faint image would eventually show up as a sort of transparent figure. As soon as Mumler discovered this accidentally, and spiritualism, meanwhile, was all the rage, being able to talk to your dead relatives, Mumler went into business as the first spirit photographer. And he fooled everybody, including Mary Todd Lincoln, with a famous photograph of the assassinated President Lincoln standing lovingly behind her, and other fake photos. Mumler was undone when some people recognized that some of the spirits in his pictures were still living Bostonians, and Mumler was arrested. But here's a case. One of your clues in these types of photos, notice that this picture, notice the composition, and notice that this guy was deliberately posed off-center. Why would that be done? So there would be room for the fake ghost to appear in the picture. This is your tip-off. When you see these spirit pictures, they're usually posed in a funny way so that they could dub in the ghost, if you see what I'm saying. Otherwise, the spirit photographer, I guess, could have seen the ghost and tried to frame it, but they didn't claim to do that. Years ago, I had a young mother from the Buffalo area called me at work, and she said she was having problems with ghosts, and she was worried about her children. And I said, now, ma'am, are you seeing ghosts? Oh, no, she said, we never see any, but she said, whenever we take pictures, we're getting these strange white shapes in our photographs. And I thought, it doesn't sound like anything I'm familiar with. I said, could you come in and bring your camera, your film? Any of you know what film used to be? Film? Bring your film in and any pictures that you have, all of them, and come in and see me. So in comes the mother and the father and the little children, all come into my office. And she shows me these pictures. This is one of them. And you see this strand-like shape, very, very white. I had never seen anything like it. It's now well known because I wrote, I think, the first learned article about this. But I was mystified. I did not know what this was. And so I looked at another one. Here's another one. I had never seen anything like this in photographs. And I did not suspect any trickery from these people. They seemed very simple, very honest. And then I looked down at her camera and I noticed the loop on the wrist strap. And as we investigators are wont to do, I picked it up and like this sort of thing, and she quickly saw where I was going with it. I'm pretty sure I didn't get that in front of the camera. And I said, well, even if you did, this strap is black. This is an unusual white. I don't understand it. But you're maybe figuring this out already, right? So I said, just let me have your camera and everything and go away and I'll experiment and I'll see what I can do. And I began to make some photos and they didn't look anything like hers. Until I turned the flash on. Remember that bouncing back effect that I introduced you to earlier? And I made this one. And this one, I love this one because in some of the descriptions of these, they talk about a spiraling vortex of energy, ectoplasmic energy, or some kind of ghost energy. No, it's just the braiding. It's just the braiding of the camera strap. You can identify kind of make and model of strap from these photos. Well, eventually it became well known, and some of the websites would say, be sure if you're a ghost hunter, be sure you take your camera strap off your camera, throw it away, because Nickell or somebody may accuse you of getting a camera strap effect. This is a much more serious issue. This is a matter of a criminal case. A young lady came to me, been sent to me by educational television, PBS television, to examine. She had this little swatch of cloth about this big with these faces on it. And here's what she told me. She sat in a seance in Lexington, Kentucky, and the medium showed these little blank squares of cloth, and several people sat in the dark. The lights were turned out. People were handed one of these blank pieces of cloth. And the spirits were asked to come forward and invoked. Meanwhile, he put out a bottle of ink on the table. And the spirits, your own spirit guides. Did you know you have spirit guides that you do? Your own spirit guides were going to come and take ink out of the bottle and make their self-portraits on this cloth. Now, you would think, who would believe that? Well, these people did. And they paid real money. And the guy he was a spiritualist from Camp Chesterfield in Indiana, a spiritualist camp. He made $800 in one night. Now, that doesn't impress you because, as you know, $800 is pocket change today. I'm talking about years ago when $800 was a lot of money. Okay, maybe it's not quite pocket change, but you get my point. So I took custody of this piece of evidence and got a sworn affidavit from her and so forth. And I took it to a crime laboratory. I know people at places like that. And this is John Fisher, a forensic analyst in Florida, and first he tried using ultraviolet light, and it didn't show anything. And then he tried using infrared, and that didn't show anything. But finally he used argon laser light, and bingo! Can you see this solvent ring? Everybody see that? It's a little faint. It shows up in the eerie green glow of the argon laser, but I think you can see that there's a decided stain there. And I had the recipe from an old book by a confessed medium, how you used a solvent and a hot iron to transfer newspaper or magazine pictures onto cloth. Now, let me go back just a minute. Don't these pictures look like ordinary photographs to you? But you wonder why the spirits would be wearing glasses and earrings in the spirit realm, though I guess they could. You see that there's directional light source, that is, light's coming from one side and casting shadows on the other. You see that? And you have extraneous background material like this. So this is just what you would expect from real photographs being transferred, but who knows what magic spirit pictures would look like. But when we found the solvent stain, we were pretty sure because we had a recipe for how to make these. Using that very recipe, I made these fake spirit pictures. And yes, that's Pat Sajak. This is several years ago. He's aged well. But wouldn't you say that mine are comparable? Okay. So with this, I got police warrants for the arrest of this man. The problem is that he was in Chesterfield, Indiana, and we were in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can only extradite for a felony. And he was ever so smart a fellow. He charged no one $800. You see, that's a felony anywhere, anytime. He charged you $40, you $40, you $40. Misdemeanor, misdemeanor, misdemeanor. You probably know what I wasn't sure of at the time. You can't add up lots of misdemeanors and get a felony. You just have more misdemeanors. You see how that works. My education in law. Nevertheless, we got warrants for him, and he never came back to Kentucky. He has since died. Could we have a moment of silence? That's long enough. Now, you know this guy? Oh, yes, the notorious John Edward. So Dateline NBC asked me to work with him on the case of John Edward, and I was happy to do that. So I warned them. I said, when you have John Edward do readings, don't let him mill about with people at a tea party before the shoot or something, because he can pick up little bits and pieces of stuff. So they said, okay, well, we'll keep him separate. So they did. So with the cameras running, Edward is doing these readings, and he's not doing so. And at some point, he starts talking about someone named Anthony. And nobody's saying, oh, Anthony. Something about Anthony in his coffin. Something about Anthony in his coffin and a ring. And about that time, very emotionally, one of the Dateline cameramen is stunned because there was an incident with the ring and his dead father, Anthony, in the coffin. And he's obviously very moved. But it turned out that Dateline had kept John Edward away from all the people, the sitters. They hadn't kept him away from the cameraman. He'd been with them all afternoon. And the cameraman, in fact, had told Edward this incident and then forgotten that he had mentioned it. Sounds like something I would do. But he recalled eventually. So with the cameras running, John Hockenberry of Dateline NBC grilled him and said, "Isn't it true that while you gave the impression that you just came out with that psychically, you've known that all this time?" And watched Edward squirm and try to get out of it and so forth. It was wonderful to behold. If you get this book and turn over to the back of the book, please don't buy it. Don't buy the book. But you can turn over to the back and you'll see where he mentions this incident. And he mentions Dateline NBC, John Hockenberry, my organization, and me. I am so proud of this and our gotcha moment. And he thought he could just make us look like heavies or something. No, John, we got you cheating. So, obviously I enjoy my work. So, after all these years, remember these fake spirit pictures that we saw a minute ago, the spirit precipitations they were called. I decided to go back to Camp Chesterfield. I had never been there. And I would see if they were still doing their tricks. And in fact, I had just been on Dateline NBC, so I was a little nervous that I might be recognized. So I changed my appearance. I shaved my mustache off for the first time in many years, before or since. Put on, a silly hat and suspenders and a cane and so forth. And I limped painfully into Camp Chesterfield under the alias of Jim Collins. And Jim was a talkative old fellow who told everyone who would listen about the sad death recently of his mother and how guilt-ridden he was that he hadn't done more for her and so forth. And he talked endlessly to the people there. And lo and behold, at a special church meeting at Camp Chesterfield, a medium was there to do billet readings. Now, a billet is a little slip of paper, and this is an actual one. Jim stole one of them from him. Please address your billet to one or more loved ones in spirit, giving first and last names. Ask one or more questions and sign your full name. So, of course, Jim listed some Collins family members and a question. Mother, will you be with me always? And signed it, Jim Collins. So the medium then, everybody was asked to fold their slip in half. I went up and asked the lady, I said, now how was I supposed to fold this? She said, oh, be sure you fold it only in half. If you fold it any other way, he won't read it. Now, I'm a former magician. I know many ways to do billet reading tricks, many different ways. I could teach you some and still fool you with another one. But I was pretty sure right then what he was doing. Look, if you fold yours in half and half again, and you fold yours into a triangle, and you pleat yours back and forth in accordion style, you would have some hope of recognizing yours when it was drawn out, right? You certainly could know that's not mine. He doesn't want you to know that. He wants them all to look alike. Okay? So what you do, he's working at a podium, he pulls one out, holds it to his forehead, but unknown to you, he has another one flipped open. It's only folded in half, so the second reason for folding it this way is it's easy to flip open with one hand. Do you follow me? So now he's reading this one, but you think he's got this one. Child's play. Okay, so he's reading for people, and they're crying. He's talking to them from their dead parents. People are crying. It's very moving. And finally he says, I have a message for the Collins family. And Jim, from the back of the audience, hear, hear, me. And he begins to read off the names very accurately. And then he said, your mother wants you to know she'll always be there for you. It was very moving. I was nearly on the verge of tears. And then I remembered that at that time, my mother was still alive and wasn't named Mrs. Collins. And I felt a whole lot better. I just caught another trickster. I wrote an expose of that and many other tricks at Camp Chesterfield, whereupon there was talk of suing me and so forth, but bring it on. Eventually, 2 or 3 of the mediums were ousted from the grounds, I've heard, and as if they had cleaned house, but don't you believe me? All right, moving on to lake monsters. One of the mysteries at lakes, from Lake Okanagan in British Columbia to Lake Champlain to Loch Ness, are reports of long-necked, multi-humped, undulating serpentine creatures. And science says that these are not likely to be some hitherto unknown prehistoric animal, because most of these lakes are about 10,000 years old. They're relatively modern. They're left over from the last ice age. So, how do we explain these phenomena? What if I told you there's something in these lakes that looks relatively like I just described? I went with National Geographic Television. We went to Lake Okanagan, and we went to this place, Rattlesnake Island, which is supposed to be the lair of Ogopogo. We couldn't find any hide nor hair of the monster. We used side-scanning sonar, and we could not find in the depths below us any Leviathan. We sent down a diving crew. Zilch. Nothing. Nada. But could this kind of creature be what's seen? I took this picture. What is this? Is this the fabled giant eel, this snake-like serpentine creature? Nah. It's a creature we know. Its name is Lutra canadensis. Northern river otter. Yeah. Almost all neck. But you're saying, wait a minute, but they're not very big. How could someone think they were 30 or 40 feet long? Well, there's an explanation for that. They tend to swim playing follow the leader. A mother and pups or some playful otters. Right, they don't look that perfectly neat with one just with its tail up, but that's a kind of cartoon exaggeration. But you get the idea. Way out there, you see 1, 2, 3, 4 humps, and it's moving, and you know you're not drunk, and you're not lying, and you're not crazy, and it's swimming at a faster speed than anything you've seen swim, because otters are very fast. And you may have seen another look-alike. What about the mystery at Roswell? Is there anybody here who has not heard of the flying saucer that crashed in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico in the 1940s? Anybody who hasn't heard that story? And a newspaper account said they had captured a flying saucer. Well, but wait. The next newspaper said, whoops, it was a weather balloon. Well, that wasn't right either. But here's some actual photographs of the wreckage. And you can check this out yourself. You can go to Roswell and you can look up the newspaper accounts of the time when a guy named Mac Brassel, whose ranch this land crashed on, came into town and told how this material consisted of foiled paper, sticks, tape, and rubber. Does this sound like an extraterrestrial craft to you? Or does it sound sort of like some kind of balloon or balloons with a kind of box kite, maybe? I can now tell you what crashed on Brassel's property. It was a secret United States government spy balloon from Project Mogul. Now, what they were doing is they were releasing these balloon trains. Look something like this. This is a recreation we made for Discovery Channel. I'm not in that picture. You know where I am? Yes, I'm taking the photograph. Okay. But I was there. And these balloons filled with helium and then this sort of box kite type contraption dangling from it. And these were called corner radar reflectors. And they would, the idea was they would lift up, and just like this could have been a weather balloon device, but the difference is the weather balloon has got its instruments picking up weather data, and the spy balloon was attempting to record sonic emissions from anticipated Soviet nuclear tests. Otherwise, it basically looked like the same thing, just a different instrument package. And we know that a Mogul spy balloon array went missing at that time in the direction of the Brazel Ranch. And Mac Brazel, nor anyone else at that time, ever mentioned until many, many years later in their dotage, some old men began to think they could remember something. But in fact, no one mentioned extraterrestrial humanoids. Nevertheless, the famous or infamous alien autopsy film, as you see here, purported to be a genuine film made secretly of the recovered alien from that crashed event. No, it was quickly shown to be a hoax. Interestingly enough, and this is someone having one of those waking dreams I talked about, but the idea of a humanoid was not even common at the time in the 1940s when this incident happened. I reconstructed this time chart showing the evolution of aliens. Start out with a little green man, beautiful Venusian creatures, flatwoods monster, dwarfs, goblins, the blob, and then in 1961 you get the first little big-eyed, big-headed humanoid, years after Roswell. And then more variety, Mothman and so forth, and then it comes back, and back, and back, until today, if you go into a toy store, this is the official alien. But it's all made up. It's just the evolution of an idea in pop culture. That's all it is. That was a real poltergeist. Now here's a photograph with the tables reversed. Here on Mars, I am the alien. You couldn't fake a picture like this, could you? But then what about crop circles? Well, here I am, a field investigator. Pun intended. Yes. And the crop circles were, well, cropping up, you may remember. And they started out as simple swirled circles, then circles with rings, rings with satellites, eventually elaborate pictograms, geometric designs, my personal favorite. And this one, I know this one's a fake because, that's right, boys and girls, I made it. Well, the point is we studied crop circle data, and there were several criteria. We could see that the crop circles were increasing in number with media reports. They were becoming increasingly complex. In other words, it wasn't just wind vortexes or something. It was some one-upmanship. It was peculiar to southern England until the story got taken to other countries, and then it showed up there. And finally, there was what we call the shyness effect. Crop circles were in distant fields, late at night. They didn't want to be seen while they were being made. So we predicted that the crop circles were a hoax phenomenon, and as we were going to press, two elderly men, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, came forward and admitted that they had started it and others copied them. And then I want to talk to you about the Giant Nazca drawings in Peru. I'm going to move a little faster here because of my time. But across 30 miles of desert pampas in Peru are great lines that run for miles, ruler straight, figures of birds and other effigies. And here's a schematic. I want you to pay particular attention to this particular one. This is the so-called Condor. From here to here is 440 feet, a football field and a half. It is so big that you need to be basically in an airplane to see and appreciate it. How, it was asked, could the ancient Nazca Indians have produced these giant figures before the invention of aircraft and so on? Hence, the many popular books about ancient aliens and ancient astronauts coming from far-off galaxies and hovering over to the awed Native Americans and beaming down instructions so they could make these giant drawings. Well, nonsense. Humbug. But I decided to show that it was not that hard to make one. People saying, look, the natives must have had, the Indians must have had surveying equipment far in advance of our time to be able to do this. I didn't think so. So I set as my goal to recreate the Giant Condor, one of the biggest and most complicated figures, and to do it only using one pair of cross sticks and two sets of knotted cord. And I did it on a landfill area. When I show you mine, it's going to look very modeled, like it's on rugged ground of different heights and stuff. No, it's flat as a pancake. The reason it looks like that is it's a landfill area, so there are light streaks in it from clay-like soil. You can see a dark streak here of shale or coal that's been dumped in. You get the idea. So trust me, flat as a pancake. And all we did was to create a center line, used a small 6-foot model, and then mopped up, so far down, so far over, with a simple unit of measurement. That's all we did. And there is my Condor, which Scientific American said was remarkable in its exactness to the original. This is a picture from one of Arthur C. Clarke's books when he reproduced my work. And you can see, again, you can see a streak here of the dark. Now my photograph's high contrast so you can see it. And we just marked it using football field lime, you know, with those rollers. The Nazcas, their area is covered with gravel, so what they do is they pick the gravel up, leaving a little cleared footpath-like line. Okay? But that's just busy work, how you do that. The problem is to lay the figure out. Years went by. In National Geographic, I did maybe 12 or 13 shows just for their Is It Real series. And you may have seen me. I would come on and say, no, it isn't. Remember? I'm that guy. Yeah, okay. So they wanted me to make a giant Nazca drawing for them because I'm maybe the world's only giant geoglyph maker. And I said to National Geographic, quote, please don't make me do that. I'm an old guy. And you know, I did this when I was young and foolish. It's a lot of work. And they said, yes, but no, we really need you to do it. And the trouble is you didn't film it. I said, no, and I've regretted that every day of my life since. We should have filmed it. They said, well, we're going to film it. So you make us one, and we'll film it. And then they said the magic words. They said, what we really want is the spider. And I breathed a sigh of relief because the spider's much smaller. And I thought, knock that out in one day. Knock the spider out. So there's the spider. And here, from one of those lift trucks, is my recreation. And there he is, Spider-Man. Okay. But here's the interesting part I wanted to share with you. Why did the Nazcas make these drawings? And there's been a lot of speculation. I'm going to give you my impression, and there's nothing particularly new in it except that I have done a lot of work to sort of put this together. Nothing very original, just I have put it together. This is my own theory. But all of these figures are peculiar in a number of ways. One is that unlike the Nazca drawings on their pottery, which are drawn in the usual way, you draw the head, lift your brush, draw a wing, lift your brush. Not these. These are drawn with a single, continuous, never-stopping line. I thought when I made the first one that it was because they were just marking it as they went. Makes sense, right? No, I don't think that anymore. But it makes sense. You need a theory. Another remarkable fact. The figures all have a pair of extraneous lines. Look at these two lines here. Spiders do not have those lines. Look at the monkey. Notice from the base of the tail, two extraneous lines. What are those? Let me put them together for you. If you walk, remember I said they were like footpaths, the gravel is clear. If you walk one of the extraneous lines and keep walking, you will traverse the entire figure and come back out the other line. That can't be a coincidence. Therefore, these were ritual walking paths. Tony Avini has a book and he calls them labyrinths in the desert. Okay, I leave that for you. If you can think of a better theory, let me know. Meanwhile, I won't hold my breath. We're almost sure that's what they were. What were they ritual walking paths to accomplish? Probably to bring rain. Doesn't seem to have worked well. Spontaneous human combustion. I'll just gloss over this quickly, but there are mysterious burning deaths where bodies are severely destroyed, almost like they've been in a crematorium, and nearby objects are not destroyed. This is Dr. Irving Bentley in Countersport, Pennsylvania, 1966. But there are many such cases. The secret is that in most cases, there is a source of the person catching on fire, even though there may not appear to be. Investigation will show that there was some way they could have caught on fire. And their body fat has tended to play a role in ignition by what's called the candle effect, or wick effect. Once the body fat begins to burn, think of bacon in a grease in a skillet, very flammable. Once it begins to burn, it's absorbed by the clothing or stuffed chair or carpeting, which serves as a sort of wick, even though it's on the exterior, to fuel still more of the fire, to burn still more of the body. In other words, the wick is making that burning efficient, the way it is in the candle. The candle doesn't just burn up real quick. It burns slowly and perfectly efficiently because of the wick. But I'm going to show you a case, and I want you to solve this. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds. There's one of the case, Mary Reeser case. She was last seen, Mary Reeser was last seen smoking a cigarette, having taken 2 Seconal sleeping tablets, and there was a grease reported on the floor. So almost a classic wick effect. Okay, here's the case I want you to solve. Okay, quickly. What happened to this poor lady in England?
Fireplace?
Yes, she fell into the fireplace. How do we know? Look. Some quick clues. Shoes missing. I expect she was standing on one foot, putting the shoe on and lost her balance, or she tripped and her foot snagged on something and her foot came out. Anyway, I think that's not a coincidence. She fell. This grate, fireplace grate, has been knocked sharply to the left. Do you see that? By what? Her head. For heaven's sake, why is this in a book on spontaneous human combustion? For heaven's sake, she fell into the fire. Whereupon sparks showered out onto the body. The wick effect took place where the body fat is, and then fire doesn't burn sideways very well, so the legs, eventually it went out. And nearby objects were not burned because, look, you can cozy up to a campfire. You can get right up close to a campfire. You don't burn up. That's all that's happening. This is not a huge inferno. This is a small fire, but it's burning for a few hours' time very efficiently. Okay. Enough of that. Maybe too much. Miracles. Conyers, Georgia. Miracle statues with heartbeats. What do you want to bet? Did the statues have heartbeats? Yes, I took a stethoscope. This is what I do. Okay, this is not clowning around. No. Did I hear any heartbeats? No. So why did people think there were? They were not using a stethoscope. They were reaching up and feeling it with their hands. Probably feeling the pulse in their own thumb. Rosaries turning to gold. Thank you, Jesus. No, wait. No, they're not. I examined several of these for the Learning Channel. Who is that guy? I heard someone say. I don't know, he's with the Learning Channel. Oh, okay, and they got in line. I got to examine these. Look, they weren't turning to gold. Most of these rosaries and crucifixes and so forth were made of brass, to which had been added a very, very thin silver wash or plating. Very thin. So when you rub them a lot, you rub through the silver, and the gold-colored brass shows through, and it looks like they're turning into gold. That's all it was. Okay. What about these miraculous pictures? At various Virgin Mary sites across the United States, started in Medjugorje in the former Yugoslavia, but these are, you point your Polaroid camera to the sun, take a quick picture, the picture develops, and instead of the round ball of the sun, you get this golden doorway flooded with golden light. Some of them are quite beautiful. Where did the sun go? Where did this golden door come from? Pilgrims thought it was the doorway to heaven mentioned in the book of Revelation. No, sorry. It's actually the lens aperture of the Polaroid one-step camera. It isn't the doorway to heaven, it's the doorway to the camera. Sorry. And here, a priest at a weeping icon in Toronto, trying to keep me sort of at bay. But the trick of weeping icons, the basic trick, promise me you won't go out and do this criminally. But if you just take a non-drying oil like olive oil, you know there are two kinds of oils. Drying oils, those of you who are artists, you know to use linseed oil in your oil paint so it will dry. Do not put olive oil in your paint. It will never dry. So get a non-drying oil like olive oil, put a drop in each eye, let it trickle down, and you are in business. Pilgrims will come from far and wide. They will fill the coffers, donating money. I have seen this many times. And it will look fresh for days, weeks, whatever. Skeptics will say this is a fraud and they will not be listened to. Go away, they will tell the skeptics. So this priest, I thought I recognized him, but you know, these Greek Orthodox priests all dress alike and have these big beards, so I thought, well, maybe they just, you know, but I thought I knew him. Turned out he had a weeping icon in Queens, New York, and now he was in Toronto with another, you know, it's very suspicious. Turns out this guy had been, listen carefully, he had been defrocked as a priest for running a brothel in Athens. And I was asked to come back after my expose of this by the Greek Orthodox Church of North America. Actually wanted me to come back because they felt this was a shame, a sin, a crime, and this is the attorney for the church, and this guy, okay, we're having trouble here. Oh, there we go. This guy is Ontario Provincial Police. But the problem is, you could say it's a fake icon, but you couldn't prove who put the oil on it. Lab tests showed it was non-drying oil. Okay, a final word from our sponsor, Looking for a Miracle. Let me introduce you to someone and a movie. Do you know Hilary Swank, the great American actress? Well, Warner Brothers produced a movie, it's a very bad movie, called The Rethinking. And it was based on the work of a miracle detective, moi. So they called me and they talked to me. I was talking to a script writer and stuff, and then they were ordering stuff from us, magazines and stuff, and my boss said, hey, you need to, what are you doing? And they told him, they said, you need to talk to Joe Nickell. He said, oh, we have Joe's books. And they're looking for a miracle book. Hillary's reading it now, they said. And eventually Warner Brothers had me, invited me to be on the site. I got to meet and talk with Hillary. And as you can imagine, it was not based very much on me. Obviously, pretty soon she finds a miracle she can't explain and converts. And so anyway, but I met Hillary, and she's a very engaging and fine person. Just wanted to show that's a scene from the movie, and that's Hillary Swank. I just wanted you to appreciate why she was picked to play me in a movie. Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the spider Inca drawing, you don't think that the ancient aliens' explanation of the long line protruding from the spider leg was valid? That it was the reproductive stem coming?
Well, there actually is a spider, I think, that does that. Here's the problem. You have to decide when you're an investigator whether you're going to take one fact and make up one special explanation for it, another fact, another explanation, different explanation for it, and so on. Or whether you're going to try to work and bring things together and have a hypothesis that will explain a lot. And of course, the principle of Occam's razor is that the simplest explanation, the one that makes the fewest assumptions, is most likely to be correct. And of course, you can explain the spider that way, but you don't explain the monkey, you see. So, no, here are two lines, and they're in these different figures. So they're not part of the anatomy. They're not part of the drawing process. They're not, you can rule out a lot of stuff. But if you take them together with, and you get the corroborative force, you see, of putting two things together, powerful argument, that plus the single continuous line suggests that these are ritual walking paths. I don't claim to have more proof than what I've shown you, but I believe that I can defend that on the principle of Occam's razor against most other explanations. Yes, sir.
I just want to comment. You mentioned we're talking about miracles. My favorite quote is Bertrand Russell, and he went to Lourdes in France. Bertrand Russell went to Lourdes in France to visit. He said, you go in there and there's all these crutches and canes with not a single wooden leg.
Actually, the person who said that was Anatole France. And his actual quote, it's in my book. These funny stories get around, and Mark Twain said a lot of things Mark Twain didn't actually say, but he should have. Bertrand Russell may have quoted that. But the original sages, Anatole France went and seeing all the crutches and everything said, what? What? No wooden legs? It's a very famous...
I have a question about the ghosts, because what about people who actually say they see them?
Yes.
My wife I experienced that with my wife one time. She did not one where just running into the rest. We were home for a funeral.
Yep.
And she's always claimed to have a lot of experience. I didn't see that, but she obviously believes she's seen.
And she's seen ghosts on more than one occasion, or had experiences?
She's had experiences.
Yeah. One of the things that I've done is that I developed a questionnaire that asks people questions about their ghost experiences. At the same time, this questionnaire also measures their fantasy quotient. For example, there's a type of personality called fantasy prone. They represent about 4% of the public, and they are the ones who talk to the Virgin Mary, have rich encounters with ghosts. The space aliens come and have messages for them, that sort of thing. They're perfectly sane and normal. And then there are people near fantasy prone and so forth. There's a spectrum. And I've many times given couples this questionnaire and found that one of them was highly imaginative and scored high, and had many, many psychic encounters of some sort. And the other one, often a guy looking not unlike yourself, was a stick in the mud. Not an interesting person at all, saw nothing. Dull.
Benefit of the doubt, but when my sister
But look, I mentioned the waking dream phenomenon, and of course the more imaginative you are, the more likely you would have a rich experience with that phenomenon. But what about people who aren't lying in bed and aren't having a waking dream? A lot of studies, there's a lot of material on this, suggest that when people have an apparitional experience, they're more apt to be over on the fantasy end of things rather than where this unfortunate gentleman is, over on the dull, unimaginative side. But more than that, they are usually having these experiences when they're tired or doing routine chores like polishing the furniture or the brass in an old haunted house, where the mind is closer to a daydreaming state. They are not doing something like, ninja dueling, or they're not working on their income tax, or, they're usually doing something like sitting watching TV and they may have dozed off, or they're closer to that alternate state of consciousness. I haven't exactly answered your question, but
my sister says I'm boring too, because she believes all that goes on. She's just boring.
But many of these fantasy-prone people, I've known many of them, and they're often colorful, wonderful people, and they're just more imaginative, perhaps. Other questions? Yes, Corey?
You mentioned psychic mediums like John Edwards, and I was wondering.
I knew you were going to say that, by the way.
How much of what they do you think is cold reading, like kind of make it up as they go, and how much do you think is that kind of cheating that you were talking about earlier, where they get information?
Well, look, the person who's doing a reading does not have to cheat, and if they want to cheat, they can do hot reading, which is find out some things about you. Like if you write in advance or call in advance for an appointment, they've got a week or two to research you. People don't think, they could look me up on Wikipedia or something. No, they don't have to do that. They can simply use the old gypsy technique called cold reading, which you know about. And cold reading means that I've not seen you before. You've just come in cold, okay? But I can start artfully fishing for information. I can say, many people today come to me with problems of love. Fortunately, this is not your problem. Others come to me with financial worries. And I see, sir, that indeed you have some financial problem. Is that not correct? That's troubling you right now. And, they're watching for cues. I was just making this up. But they actually, pretty soon the person's nodding and they're telling them stuff. Well, they listen but pretend not to be hearing all that. And then 10 or 15 minutes later, they will feed one of those facts back, but in a different way, or using an inference based on that. And you think, they told me new stuff. No, it's a trick called cold reading. But look, a lot of psychic readers, I believe, are honest and sincere and fantasy prone. They believe they have special powers. And such a person need only talk to a credulous person and say a lot of things. And the credulous person will pick and choose and try to make it fit and forget the things that don't fit and exaggerate the ones that do. Studies will show this. I once taught an actress, for purposes of a TV drama, taught a young actress who was very good at this. I taught her some tricks of cold reading, including the question trick. I said, just ask them something, and then if you're right, just say, see, I told you. And if they say no, you'll have to make something up. And I gave her some examples of stuff. She was a quick learner like that. She was really good. So this guy comes up, we've got the TV camera. Sir, may we, yes, he comes in. She says, do you have a sister? Yes, he said. And she went on more reading. So Later, they took him aside and interviewed him and said, how good do you think she was? He said, she's very good. So what impressed you particularly about her reading? He said, well, for example, she told me I had a sister. No, she didn't. She said, do you have a sister? It works remarkably. So the thing is that some people just believe that they're psychic, and some people believe they are too, and they're just fooling each other with no deliberate intent. You don't have to actually be doing a lot of faking. Most people don't even have a tape recording of what was said. So when you say, well, what exactly did she say? When she told you you had a sister, how exactly did she... Oh, well, no, she said I had a sister. They become very emphatic. No. If you had a tape recording, you can see what really happened and how... And I've analyzed many of the tapes, like with John Edward and Jigsaw Prong and others, and you see the dynamic of it, and you see how people read into it and give them pass after pass. You're never wrong. If they say, no, that didn't happen, the person will say, go home and ask your mother. Sylvia Brown does that a lot. And you go ask her mother, now you get two people trying to help her come up with something. Yes?
Have you ever heard of sounds of guns that weren't there?
Have I?
Or heard about anybody doing that. In 1970, my husband and I were in Nuremberg, Germany, and camping in a VW camp we bought over there.
You were lying in bed?
We were. But then
you were, but you weren't dreaming.
We heard what it was like in the distance, kind of like that. And so they asked them in the morning, hey, is there a military base around or something? And they said, no, but we were just a hop and a jump from...
Here's the
weren't
problem.
Advertising the Nuremberg place, but it wasn't very far.
Here's the problem.
Hitler had his thing. So I was...
But here's the problem. All we know is that you think you heard that, and there are two of you, I take you at your word, but you think you heard a noise.
We heard a noise.
You heard a noise. I don't mean to be insulting, but so what? I mean, there are a number of things that could have been, from a sonic boom from a plane to some farmer actually shot a gun off to, so here's the problem with the paranormal. I'll leave you with a secret. Almost all of the paranormal is promoted by an example called example of faulty logic called argumentum ad ignorantum, or an argument from ignorance. Now, it doesn't mean the person is ignorant. I remember saying this once on a radio show, and they said, who you calling ignorant? No. It means arguing from a lack of knowledge. Let me give you some examples. We don't know what the noise was, therefore it was a ghost. No, we don't know. We don't know. Well, what else could it be? Well, if we're going to play that game, the least likely thing was that it was a ghost. Everything else we can think of is more likely. What was the bright light in the sky? I don't know. Aha, see? Flying saucer from another planet. No. Why did Mrs. Smith's cancer go into remission? Search me. Some cancers go into remission sometimes. Oh no, it's a miracle of the Holy Virgin Mary. No, you cannot say, I don't know, and infer that you do know. If I leave you with not much else, I want to leave you with that, and maybe Occam's razor. Look for the simplest explanation. One other. None of us has the burden to disprove. I don't know what you think you saw many times. I know people had real experiences of some sort. I wasn't there. You cannot prove, I invite you to try it, you cannot prove there are no leprechauns. Anyone want to try it? Prove there are not leprechauns. Well, we went to Ireland and we searched and we found no leprechauns. Oh, Did you go around Blarney Castle and search the bushes there? Oh, you didn't, huh? Okay, we did. We searched Blarney Castle and we still, no leprechauns. Well, don't you know the weak creatures have the power of invisibility, don't you know? Oh. So, the point is, I don't have to prove that wasn't a flying saucer from Mars. You would have to prove that it was. And simply saying, well, what else could it be? Or it did this bizarre something. Well, I wasn't there. And most of the time, we don't have very good evidence. And sometimes when we have evidence, it's faked, photoshopped, or whatever. So I think we're wrapping it up. Thank you very much.